I'm having lighting issues today, so hopefully it'll behave. I woke up to just beautiful lighting, and then, I figured it would last a little bit, and it did, but then I took a nap and accidentally, I had one of those weird naps where I just couldn't wake up, you know what I mean? Felt like I was being dragged down by some sort of sticky brain fluid. I don't know. I've got a lot of books today. I read them over the course of 2 days, last week, beginning of last week, I guess, and then the day after I read them, I was going to do a video, but I just had a really bad day. I had a number of just bad brain week, but then also combined with that, there was I got this weird sudden burst of dust allergies after cleaning the house, and it just ruined my mood. And so I got there's a couple of books in the top of the stack here that I really didn't like, but I kind of really really got upset with them in a totally disproportionate way that made me uncomfortable. It was not a fun emotion. I didn't want to put it in my video, so I am going to be negative about those books. But after taking my anger out on these poor kids' books, I just didn't have the energy left to do the same in a video. So I had to wait for my for just everything to be better. So it's and then of course I got busy and stuff. Anyways, why am I talking about this? I should be getting to the books. Got a lot of books to get through. So starting with my least favorites, here we go. And going steadily better. Okay, this book is Spineless by Lindsay Leslie, illustrated by Alice Brereton. Okay, first thing I want to address, and I know that it is nitpicky of me, but you call a book, this book is spineless, and give it a spine? I mean, you just have this opportunity here to have fun with book design, and it's the most standard book design you could possibly think of. I know that by the end of the book gets a spine, but come on, it's called This Book is Spineless. Take the spine off. Make it a spineless book somehow. Spiral bound, or maybe a fold out. I don't know, but I just feel like there was an opportunity missed, and that kind of put me off on the wrong footing to start out. I really wish that I could get inside of the head of the person who wrote this while they wrote it. This is interesting. She's works in public relations and owns a pie company, and this is her debut book. I really want to see what she was thinking, because the thing that makes this book... So this book is if you've ever read this book, I think it's called... it's a book called Don't Open This Book, I think. And the premise of that is sort of similar to this. Or other... I feel like I've seen a few other books like that in recent years. I would almost consider This Book Has No Pictures, or the book with no pictures, to be in this category almost. Books that are where the book itself is sort of speaking it. Well, I guess. Yeah, the book with no pictures doesn't strictly do this, but but Don't Open This Book does, and this book does. It's the narrator is the book itself, the physical book, and the book is talking to the kid, and there's a real opportunity there for this sort of fun back and forth where the book sort of asks a question, and then it's implied that the child reading the book answers, or having the book read to them, answers the question that the book is asking, and there's almost an implied dialogue between the reader and the book, and that's pretty fun. And the dialogue doesn't have to be words. It can even just be the act of turning the page, like this. I don't even want to hear about an adventure, nor see it, nor feel it, nor smell it, nor taste it. In fact, I'm on edge whenever you turn a page, and then you turn the page, and then it responds. Right? So it's a back and forth. That has potential to be fun. I think Don't Open This Book did it better. But, at the end of the day, what's wrong with it? It's just another book like that. Well, okay, I'm really nitpicking here, but this book just feels all over the place. It feels like the author could not make up their mind what they wanted their book to be. And I can't tell if that's they had all these ideas for books and they decided to shove them all into one, or if they wrote a book and felt like it was boring and tried to do more with it or something. It comes across extremely disjointed. So the thing is that it's talking about the book being scared. Perhaps this is a mystery. Mysteries give me the creeps. I'm a book, not a detective. I want to stay far away from pitch black pathways and slinky shadows. So the book kind of seems to be about facing your fears. At the same time, it kind of seems to be talking about different book genres, because the book goes through the different genres that it might be. Here it's a sci-fi, there it was a mystery. You know, it's a nature story. Here it's a pirate book, right? So it's talking about genres of books. I feel like that would be cohesive if it was a book that was talking about, like, you know, like the book itself being afraid of all the possibilities, and then talking about the possibilities that books can have, all of the the different genres of books that there are. That to me, those two things go together, and that would not be too many things, right? You could have just had a book that was just the book being scared. This is the book being scared with some genre discussion. So that's potentially interesting. It also has this kind of theme going through it of using like heavy alliteration. That's not exactly a theme, but it's almost a theme, stylistic theme. That I feel like you could have slipped in there because that's just stylistic. But then, and I know it's just one extra thing, but it's just, I have this theory that there's like 3 things is too many things for a thing to be. Like, I always think about the Pokemon Tropius. Yes, I am a Pokemon fan. Because like Tropius is a dinosaur, a banana tree, and it flies. And if it was like a banana tree that flies, I mean, that'd be weird, but it would be like 2 concepts together. A dinosaur that flies, yeah, sure. A banana tree dinosaur, yeah, sure. A banana dinosaur tree that flies, it just feels like one too many ideas in the same thing. You can be out there sometimes, but other times it just comes across as like, what were you thinking? And this book, I know I'm going on and on and on about this. This book is one of them. It mixes in this theme of the 5 senses. So it says that the book says that it's scared, and I have absolutely no sense of adventure. I don't want to hear about an adventure, nor see it, nor feel it, nor smell it, nor taste it. And actually does put those in italics to make sure that you notice that it's talking about senses. And then, as it continues to talk about book genre and facing your fears, it also says, do you hear something? Do you see something? Do you feel something? Do you smell something? And even, do you taste something? I guess talking about the salt water. And it's just like, wait, why are we sticking this in here? Why is this being stuck in to this book? Like, that's too many things. Where is this book trying to go? What is this book's focus? What is this story's, like suddenly I'm stuck trying to figure out this story's point. Not because a story needs a point, because I'm very much of the opinion that a story doesn't need a point and almost shouldn't have a point. It doesn't need a thesis. But I'm stuck trying to figure out what this book's thesis is, because it seems to have 3 or 4, and it's just distracting from the story. And it's perplexing to me, and I really want to know what was going on in their mind. Were they just like, oh, I want to make a story about 5 senses. Oh, I also want to do this. Or were they like, did they write the book that I just described where it's just about genre, and then we're like, I feel like this isn't educational enough. Aren't kids' books supposed to teach you something? Shove the 5 senses into there. It's so inelegant to me, and it's really distracting. So I did not like this book. Also, it needs to be spineless. It's going to be called Spineless. Come on. Okay. Next book is Clem and Crab, and I want to say for the record that this is not, I'm not talking about this one second because it's a little bit better than the last one. These ones are at least tied, possibly even, maybe this should have gone first because this might be my least favorite. It's hard for me to explain exactly why I dislike this book without reading it to you, because I feel like reading it to you would demonstrate, like, straight up, I wouldn't even have to say anything, you would get the point of why I don't like it. But okay, so it's about a young girl who's at the beach, and she finds a crab, and she accidentally brings the crab home because it's stuck in a plastic bag, because what she was doing at the beach was she was collecting things from the beach, including nature stuff, but also mostly trash. She was cleaning the beach, and there was a crab caught in a plastic bag, and so she tries to keep it, but her sister immediately says, no, Clem, the crab belongs in the sea. So she brings it back to the sea. And then it climbs onto her pant leg and comes back into her life. And then she does various environmental related things. She uses her trash. She reuses the trash that she collected from the beach to make art for her school. She goes to the aquarium, and this is my least favorite part of the book. It says, they learned a lot of facts about conservation, the huge problem of plastics in the ocean, and what we can all do to help. That is the moment that it became fully clear that this book is supposed to be a book about environmentalism, about treating the ocean nicer and cleaning up after yourself and not polluting. But I think that the problem with that is also demonstrated by this line, which is that it says that they learned lots of facts about what we can all do to help. And then the book never says those facts. Yeah, it doesn't even have a section in the back of the book where it like a for the parents section or a like resources section where you can learn how to follow up on the messages that the book is trying to impart. The book just puts the messages in there. I hate this for so many reasons. They learned lots of facts about what we can all do to help and then don't tell me what it is. Why are you saying that? You're just saying, oh yeah, there are lots of things to help. It's like the book is nothing but, and I'll get to this because it is really nothing but, it's nothing but a focus on preaching about how we should all take better care of the environment, and yet it doesn't even manage to actually do that because it's just about the idea of it. It doesn't actually provide resources or substance to that. It's about the idea of helping the environment in the abstract, which just completely misses the point. Like the only reason that your book should be 100% about environmentalism is if it also acts as sort of an informational booklet about environmentalism. No, it doesn't do that. Okay, I feel like I didn't really communicate that properly, but whatever. Anyways, she goes to her class, and then her classmates discover the crab, and then her teacher says, "Why didn't you put him back?" "I did, but he found me again. The beach is messy and dangerous. I try my best to keep it clean, but it's a big job." And then Clem knew her teacher was right. She would have to take him back to the beach. This bugs me because this is a lesson that we already learned, and I have to question, why is this book teaching us this lesson twice? Why does she find the crab, and then the book makes a really big point out of like, crabs belong in the sea, take it back. So she does, and then it ends up with her anyways, and then we have to go through the process again of being like, crabs belong in the sea, take it back. That didn't need to be said twice, so I start to wonder why it was said twice, and I think, to me, it's pretty clear why it was said twice. I think it was said twice because, in spite of the fact that this book really has no story to speak of, in my opinion, like it's the most like straightforward utilitarian, like it's just conveying the abstract concept of environmentalism and not telling a fun story. I feel that the fact that the crab is put back in the ocean, taken out of the ocean, and then put back in the ocean again is indicative of the fact that the author, in their heart, who is the author? Fiona Lumbers, wanted to write a fun story. But the fun story that they could think of was this story about the girl going on an adventure with a crab. And yet, because the book was about environmentalism, and that would be against the message of environmentalism because crabs belong in the ocean, and you shouldn't take them out and treat them as your pet, your friend, the author seems to feel, I can feel a sense of the author's guilt at their own desire to have a fun, like animal-human friendship story. And so, instead of just deciding to, have an animal-human friendship story, or to just stick to their guns with their messaging of, you leave the crab in the ocean, they kind of try to do both and end up just waffling back and forth where the crab goes in and out of the ocean, in and out of the ocean, and you teach the same lesson twice and feel like the book is repetitive. And instead of feeling like a story, it just feels like the author guilt-tripping herself while she tries to convey an environmental message that in her heart she doesn't really believe in, because wouldn't it be more fun though? Like, that's the vibe I get. It's like, it's important to be good to the environment, but wouldn't it be more fun if I ignored that? But no, it's better to be good to the environment. And like, it makes it so that it feels like the author doesn't believe in the message that she's saying. It undercuts the message. I mean, and the message is already undercut because, again, no resources on actual environmentalism. I couldn't believe that it never followed up with, like, it says she learned facts about how to be good to the environment and then doesn't tell us the facts. How about just, like, you don't even have to have a resources section. You could even just replace that line with she learned this, or even just one example instead of saying she learned some facts. Why so abstract? That's how this whole book is. Instead of getting into actual detail, it just kind of glosses over the it feels like somebody describing the outline. Reading the story feels like somebody describing the plot. I could have just read you the book in this time, and you would have gotten the point even better. but it feels like somebody describing the plot of a book rather than you actually reading the book. Like, it feels like it's the outline for a book, because it never gets into the details. It says everything in the vague sense and in the abstract. So in the end, they go and they clean up the beach. And this is what's incredible to me. This beautiful beach with its endless skies and magical underwater worlds that came and went with the tides. Clem made a promise that she would always look after it for Crab and all the other sea creatures. And that's it. No, not even a phone number or a website to visit. So I have so many problems with this. It is boring. It pretends to be a story, but isn't actually. It feels more like an outline of a story. It has an environmental message, but doesn't support it with actual environmental resources. It tries to have an environmental message, but undercuts it with the author's clear desire to have a message that they felt was in conflict with their environmental message, and yet they didn't feel like taking the time to actually like think about a solution that would maybe serve both and be a more heartfelt story. This is so many of the things that I have a problem with kids' books in general are summed up in this book. So yeah, that's to me is a good example of what not to do. Sorry, Fiona. Okay, Too Perfect. Now we're getting into books here where I did read them like more than a week ago at this point. So I'm gonna try and remember stuff, but hopefully I won't have too much trouble. This is gonna be a long video. Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward book. It's a picture book. It feels like it's written for it, like it must have been written for like 8-9-year-olds, but it kind of feels like it's written about middle schoolers. I guess it's elementary school kids, but it has a very long afterword. It definitely has like a long afterword. It definitely has a very 6 pages of this. Recommended readings and stuff. It's very much like this is trying to make a point and teach you something. So it's kind of like the story. The story feels a bit like the method of delivery for this 6-page afterword of resources, talking about like self-image and trying. It's called Too Perfect by Trudy Ludwig and illustrations by Lisa Fields. But yeah, obviously, Too Perfect. It's a book talking to kids about like not to strive for perfection and how to have a better self-image and blah blah blah. Or at least that's kind of what it claims to be about. It's sort of talking to the kids like, don't be so hard on yourself. It's also kind of talking to the parents like, don't be so hard on your kids, because it seems clear that Kayla, the character who is too perfect, that she's getting the pressure to be perfect from her family. And this is where the story starts to get a little bit weird to me. The story is told from the perspective of Maisie, who's this redheaded kid. And so Maisie admires Kayla from afar for being perfect, and then gets to know Kayla better. And what we learn about Kayla is all observations that Maisie makes of Kayla. And then Kayla goes to Maisie's house and kind of has a little freak out. And then there's a bunch of sections where Maisie kind of talks to her mom about what's going on in Kayla's life, and then Maisie goes and talks to a teacher about what's going on in Kayla's life, and we kind of like learn about maybe like the like dark side of perfection in Kayla's life, all through Maisie's perspective, 100% through Maisie's perspective. And the problem that I have with this is that the conflict in the story isn't Maisie's. The conflict in the story is Kayla's. Kayla has a terrible life. She breaks down here and hints at some dark stuff. Like she has an issue. She's got the problem. She's got the conflict. She's the one who needs to have a solution. She's the one who needs to find a solution or learn a lesson in this book. But she doesn't. After we have Kayla's freak out, Kayla exits stage left. Kayla is there to demonstrate something to Maisie. Kayla has all the conflict, all of the tribulation of this story, but she leaves. She's just there to demonstrate that could happen to somebody, and then all the rest of the story, all of the resolution that we have from that conflict is just Maisie thinking about Kayla's life from a distance, talking about Kayla's life with other people, meddling in Kayla's life basically from a distance, and then like and then the final pages, it's like Maisie celebrating her life because she realizes that her life isn't so bad. And I'm just like, Your life never was so bad. What about Kayla's life? Kayla's life is bad. I want to see, if you're gonna like present Kayla's life and present all of these issues that Kayla has, like, please follow up on your attempted humanizing of Kayla. Like, don't just like present her as like, oh, she's not just perfect, she has a complicated, difficult life, and then drop her because she served her purpose as somebody to demonstrate this concept to Maisie. Like, follow up with like Kayla finding some of the answers herself, Kayla resolving some of her own conflict. She disappears from the story halfway through the book, right at the peak of her darkest moment. Literally after this page, she never shows up again. That to me is astounding. It's like it's like this should be Kayla's story, but then it's 100% Maisie's story, and that just bothers me. Okay, I'll stop harping on that. I'm trying to kind of like seek the right way to explain that, and I'm not coming up with it, so I'm going to stop babbling. But here's the thing that makes that even worse, in my opinion. Kayla is sort of okay, so I'm pretty sure I'm not misunderstanding this. Kayla is an Asian American character, and of course there's kind of like this cultural stereotype, and I'm not the one to speak to whether this is, you know, an accurate stereotype or not. I'm just saying that there is a cultural stereotype of, you know, Asian American kids being under intense amounts of pressure to, you know, perform in whatever or succeed from their parents. And so rather than just being a story about Kayla, you know, that isn't told from Kayla's perspective, this becomes a story about sort of an Asian American family told from an entirely from an outsider's perspective, from the perspective of this redhead, which seems really weird to me. I'm not going to say too much about this because I feel like, as a white person myself, it's not necessarily my place to be making this critique in any amount of detail. But by that same token, what I will say is that it isn't the place of this, you know, of this white perspective to be the one telling this story about an Asian kid's struggle. For this to be a book that just essentially the story, rather than being about this kid who's too perfect and the lessons we can learn from that, or a story about that kid finding any kind of, you know, like solution for their problems, this is just a story that just feels like white people going like, wow, wouldn't it suck to be Asian? Look at how hard they have it. Over here in our white family, we don't judge people or put them under that much pressure. And that's the better way to do it. And then they just leave it at that. Like, that's the kind of the vibe that I get and the message that I get from this book. And I hate it. That just seems, that's pretty self-explanatorily awful. And, you know, like, it's also, like, it'd be one thing if it was an Asian American author telling a story about an Asian American kid having this experience. But when it's a presumably white author telling a certainly from a white perspective story about this Asian kid's life, it really just feels like looking in almost like at a zoo, like looking at it from afar looking at it from afar in a way that like doesn't give it any sense of authenticity or give me any confidence in its accuracy or in its truth. And just comes across as judgmental, and also very stereotyping, because, like, yes, you have this concept of Asian parents being really pressuring of their kids, but you got this idea from the culture. You didn't get it from your experience, right? So don't write about it. Don't like that book at all. Okay. This one is called The Thing About Bees, a love letter by Shabazz Larkin. I got this book because I like books that talk about bugs being good, because I love bugs. I'm somebody who, rather than being a dog or cat person, is a bug person and a spider person. And so that's why I got this. Unfortunately, this book... Okay, so first of all, that is what this book is. This is a book about how bees are good and how we should love them. However, it's written... and I'm not... You know, this isn't conjecture. It's written in the description here, I can't remember where it is. Oh, I wrote this book because I have a ridiculous fear of bees. So it was written. Oh, I should finish that. Sorry. Shabazz Larkin says, I wrote this book because I have a ridiculous fear of bees. When my sons were born, I didn't want to pass that fear to them, so I set out to discover all I could about the little buzzers. So it's written from the perspective of somebody who fears bees and doesn't want to pass that on to their kids. So they're trying to convince, or they're well, that's the problem, really. They're demonstrating to their kids that bees are not bad. But it comes across as somebody trying to convince themselves that bees are not bad, or trying to convince the reader that bees are not bad. Rather than simply state a world where bees are good, it sounds like it's based on the premise that you already hate bees, that when you're coming to this book, you hate bees, and now we're going to teach you that that's wrong. And in some cases, right, people might hate bees, and maybe this book would be a perspective that they can connect to. But I feel like this book fails in its purpose, which is to not pass on the fear in the first place, to have the introduction be positive. This still operates under the assumption that the kid. It feels like it operates under the assumption that the kid has already adopted your fear of bees, and now you're trying to unlearn that instead of doing what it claims to be doing and simply never passing on the fear in the first place. You are implying the existence of the fear in the way that this book is written, and I think that that's the wrong approach to introducing a kid to bees in a way that'll make them never fear them in the first place. And it's kind of distracting too, because it never sounds fully sincere. It talks about it like yeah, bees are great, but also like, come on, we're all scared of them, right? Which is just not the case. There was another thing I was going to say about that just came to my mind and then it left again. So, oh well. It's brave to try and understand the things that scare us, yes. But that makes this a book for you. This is a book for you. This is not a book for your kids. And if that's your intended purpose statement, I think that you failed at your intended purpose statement. You've made a book for yourself to try and convince yourself, and don't seem to be succeeding fully, that bees are good. Okay, the other thing that I have a problem with this book, the illustrations are fine. It's all good. I haven't really been talking about the illustrations because they haven't been really important. The writing style is fine. This bothers me a bit. Okay, so everything you need to know about how not to be stung. A guide to bees and wasps from kind to kinda mean. Once again, you are utterly undercutting your message here. If your message is don't be afraid of bugs, just respect them, and then you're going to go and be like, here's a guide for bees and wasps from kind to kinda mean, you're still calling bugs mean. You don't want to pass on your judgment. You don't want to pass on your fear, but you're still going to go ahead in the back and say that they're kind of mean. And yes, the ones that he lists as kind of mean are wasps and not bees. But you know what? That's judgmental too. Like I don't understand this thing that people do where they're like, okay, I will give you bees, but I am keeping my hate for wasps. Like, why? If you see the merit in getting over your fear of bees or getting over your hatred of bees or any animal, why does that not carry over to the rest of them? You leave wasps alone and take precautions around them, and they're just animals. They're not kind of mean, okay? They're not mean. They don't have that kind of intent. But then they talk about how they're kind of mean. I hate that. Wasp rights, come on. Wasps are just like, they're just bees. They're just animals too, okay? And they're pollinators, and this book does mention that. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to be like, bees are good, you don't have to be scared of bees, they're pollinators. Wasps are also pollinators, but you can be scared of them. Like, why? Why does the buck stop with bees? I don't get it. Okay, so yeah, so I have a problem with this book. It doesn't sound sincere. It doesn't succeed in its stated purpose, and it doesn't sound sincere. It operates under the assumption that you already hate bees, which I think, or already fear bees, which I think leads to more of a fear of bees rather than just normalizing not being afraid of them. And it demonizes wasps because, of course, nobody can talk about how bugs are good without being like, but some bugs I will never feel that way about, just so you know. come on, people. Okay, this book is called Silence. It's by, this is an interesting name, Lemniscates or Lemniscates. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that name. This book, I think, could have been good. Okay, Lemniscates, or Lemniscates, must be Lemniscates, is an illustration studio of artists and designers located in Barcelona. So, it's a group effort, I guess. It's in the section Children's Mindfulness, which I didn't know was a section. I think this book could have been good if the pictures weren't terrible. I'm sorry. I really don't like the art style. I'll read you a little bit of it to get the idea. It's really, really simple. There's not a story here. In the silence, I can hear the waves crashing and the wind playing with my kite. At night, I can hear what the stars tell me, and in the morning, what the birds say. When I listen, I can hear my feet when dancing, my heart when running, my legs when swimming, and my breath when still. In spring, I can hear bees living flowers. Okay, so you get the idea. It's just like a peaceful. It's a mindfulness exercise, I guess. I think some of the wording is great. I think it's well written, but man, I just can't. I just couldn't get into it with this sort of like, I don't know. The art style just feels sort of impatient to me. Not just because of all these scribbles and stuff, but because it just, like, the level of detail, it just feels kind of default to me. Like, there's not a lot of particularly unique personality in here. It feels like they just kind of like, I sometimes complain about how stories will be straightforward and not offer like the heart that comes with like detail and interesting unique wording choices, or like touches of realism and life that come from details. I kind of feel like this is the visual version of that. That's about all I have to say about that book. Stripes the not cat tiger. Stripes the tiger. Okay, this one I picked up because obviously it has a cute cover. And I guess the story is fine. I am not a fan of the art personally. Again, it kind of feels impatient to me. It feels like it was kind of scribbled out, and like they wanted to include detail but didn't have the patience for it, I feel like, is what I'm seeing in the way that these plants are drawn. But, that's really judgmental of me. It's by Jean Leroy and Berenguer Delaporte, I think is how I pronounce that. But, it's got like watercolor pencil illustrations, and I just feel like it's a bit sparse. I don't know. Or it can't make up its mind. It's sparse in some parts and then like detailed in other parts. And I don't know. To me, what is this tree? What's going on with that tree? I don't know. Or this tree, for that matter. I'm just not a fan of the art, but that's just me. That's subjective, of course. It's about Stripes, who is a cat that wants to be a tiger. He gets upset when everybody calls him a cat, and he's a tiger, wants to be in the jungle. So then his owner gets fed up with it and takes him to the zoo to see a real tiger, and the real tiger wishes he could be Stripes and like a cat, and Stripes wants to be tiger. So they have an idea, and somehow the tiger goes home with the guy. They swap places, and the zoo rolls with their new tiny tiger. It's just really boring. It just feels really flat. There's what I just told you is not even, in my opinion, that much more embellished than the story itself. The story doesn't have to be super detailed, doesn't have to be super embellished, but if your story is all about a character in this case, I think a little bit more detail is good. And, they do provide that, I guess. He doesn't concern himself with chasing mice anymore. He prefers larger prey instead. He roars. When you pet him, he no longer purrs, he roars. Striped Shadow allows him to imagine that he's big. There's moments like this. This is probably my favorite page. I don't know. I guess maybe that's... I don't know what my specific complaint is, but it felt really flat to me. It just felt like it was the bare minimum it needed to be to communicate its idea. No particular character. No, I didn't really feel like an endeared to the character at all. I didn't feel moved by the atmosphere at all. I didn't laugh. Just didn't have a lot going for it. Kind of boring. Okay, this is Numeralia by Jorge Lujan and Isol. Jorge Lujan, I read a book of his a little while back. I think it was called... well, I can't remember what it's called because I read a lot of them this week and I'm getting them all mixed up now. I'll put it up on the screen or something. Anyways, this one's Numeralia. I generally have found myself to be a really big fan of Jorge Lujan's books. I think they're really great. Numeralia is low on this list because it's not my kind of book. It would be just fine. The art style is interesting enough. It has character to it. Like cute little funny. See, this is when I say that something feels rushed, I don't just mean it's sloppy, because like, look, that's kind of sloppily drawn, but look how much character and personality is in that. Like, I feel like the artist took interest in their own work. When I talk about drawings being impatient, I kind of mean that, like, it doesn't feel like the artist was that interested in what they were drawing. They just felt like there needed to be plants there, so they drew plants, like, get it over with, instead of like putting some care into like doing it their way and making it personal and having fun. Anyways, this is an alphabet book for numbers, and it's kind of off kilter because of that, because it doesn't, like, it's not saying like, here are 0 things, here's 1 thing, here are 2 things, here are 3 things. It's more like 0 for the way an egg stands, 1 for the world's smallest flag. It's talking about the shape of the numbers, I guess. 2 for the duckling who is not so ugly after all. 3 for bedtime kisses when night falls. Right, so it's talking about the shape of numbers, which is really an interesting take. But all it is a counting book. And I didn't like the art well enough to have that carry it into... I mean, the art's great. Look at the paper texture there, that like pinched paper texture and these little tiny guys. But I didn't like it well enough to carry the whole book for me. But I think this is a good book for a different audience. It just wasn't my type. Paper Mice. This book has nice illustrations. Who's this by? This is by Megan Wagner Lloyd and Phoebe Wall. Nice illustration style, I thought. I really appreciate the limited use of color throughout this book. Really interesting idea with these 2 mice that they cut out of paper and then they become alive, I guess, and explore through the night. This book doesn't really come across as having like a point to it, which I think is a plus in my opinion. But somehow I just wasn't particularly interested. It's really just these 2 mice exploring. She finds a dollhouse. If only had an extra pair of paws. He's exploring food. Yeah, so it just kind of talks about their adventure. It's fine. I guess I felt like there was more potential to this concept. I think maybe that's my problem with this book, is that I got excited on the first couple of pages because I was like, oh, is this a thing that people cut mice out of paper? And then the paper mice are coming to life. And I was expecting something pertaining to that. The adventure seems kind of disconnected from the fact that they are paper mice. Obviously they're small and their adventures relate to their size, so it's about them being mice. But why are they paper? I think it's really cool that they're paper. I just wish that they felt paper throughout the story. They may as well just be real mice, except for that they were cut out of paper to begin with, which just seems like a strange detail. Maybe paper mice are a thing that I don't know about, and that's enough justification. But to me, I wanted, like, let's have some story that like relates to the fact that they are paper. This mouse like falls into water and then dries himself next to a fire, and like, yeah, he gets a little scorched, but he's not like paper soggy. He's not like flopping over the edge of the dish he's in, and he's not like burning like a paper would. And it's just I just feel like there was a potential for some really interesting exploration of like this weird idea of living paper mice that just doesn't feel like it was done. It's just kind of an adventure the 2 mice would have. So to me, it kind of fell flat. It was a little bit boring. I like that it doesn't really have a point. They just kind of explore and then they go back inside of books at the end of the day. So I guess they're like bookmarks. Is paper mice like a traditional thing for a bookmark? So it was fine. It just didn't. I just felt like it had a little bit more potential and it didn't really interest me that much. Okay, Taking Time by Joe Loring Fisher. This one has gorgeous art in it. It's just a showcase of like different kids around the world. Taking time to listen to a bird song on the breeze. Japan, taking time to gather up the blossom dancing free. Taking time to snuggle in my dog's soft velvet fur. It's just showing like cultural diversity. But yeah, it's just showing like different cultures, different parts of the world, and that's the point of this book, is kind of showcasing that, and about, it's a little bit meditative again. Does it say that section? No. Taking time to wonder at the vast, astounding sky, taking time to gaze upon a flock that passes by. The rhyming is fine. The art is pretty. It's, it shows different cultures around the world. It doesn't really say anything about them. It's a little bit cheesy, and it doesn't really have a story. That's fine. I think they're nice pictures to look at. Maybe could be the beginning for a kid of like imagining where they might want to travel when they're older. So I didn't think it was bad, but it was kind of boring. This one's called Here I Am, story by Patty Kim, pictures by Sonia Sanchez. Okay, this is a really interesting book. I've never seen anything like this, that particular thing that I'm about to say. This is a wordless book with a different author than the illustrator. This, let's see. This is kind of interesting style. It's sketchy, but it's got some character to it. It's like pencil and watercolor mixed with collage. I like a little bit of collage mixed in. I think that kind of reminds me of like the Lane Smith books that I read when I was a kid, and it makes me happy. It's told entirely through the pictures. It's essentially a comic book. It sort of reads like a graphic novel. It does a pretty good job at communicating some, like, did a good job. She's obviously, moved to a new city, came from the airport in the previous pages, missing her home. She goes in her pocket, she touches this red rock, and as she's touching it, she thinks about her home, which that's Korea, from Busan. And for the most part, it makes sense, but there are there's like two, maybe three sections of this book where I was like, what's going on? I like really trying to study the pictures, trying to figure out what's going on, which is kind of, to me, like, that's a little bit of a disappointment, because if you're going to have a story with no words, just pictures, you better like just really, maybe even focus group this stuff, like really make sure that it's a smooth, non-confusing reading experience, because that's all that your book has that to communicate the ideas is the pictures. So the pictures better communicate the ideas, and it better not trip me up. There were a few points where I was tripped up. If it weren't for that, overall, I think this is a decent story. There's some pages that just kind of feel like they're just creating atmosphere and not directly moving the story along, which I think is a nice thing to have. And then it's, becomes like kind of a heartwarming story about like exploring your new city and making friends and stuff, and maybe a little bit of the balance between the past and the future. I'm not really too sure. It's fine. I think it's an interesting concept. I prefer a book with words. It's an okay art style to me, but not my absolute favorite. And I think I would have rated it a little bit higher if I didn't get tripped up by being confused what was going on a few times. But that's why it's a neutral. My Big Dumb Invisible Dragon, written by Angie Lucas, illustrated by Brigitte Sif. Okay, this is a very interesting book. I wasn't quite so sure what to think of it, but I kind of admire it for being a little bit daring, I feel. It gets real heavy real fast, which is not what I expected from this. So it starts out with this. Have you ever seen an invisible dragon? Neither did I. Okay. It was the day that Ollie's mom came to get us from Turtle Park instead of my mom. She had a funny look on her face, and she opened her mouth 3 times before any words came out. Dad and I had to get used to making dinner without Mom there. So it doesn't say it directly, but it starts page 1 with the mom dying, and I really admire the way that they communicated that without saying it outright. Not that there would be a problem necessarily saying it outright, but I think this is a really good example of like the way that you can make your story have personality and not be just boringly straightforward without coming across as like overly floofy, overly wordy, overly poetic, overly try-hard. it communicates, it tells you in a straightforward way the things around what's happening. And even if it said it outright, providing that kind of detail just grounds it a little bit in realism. She had a funny look on her face. His mom came up to pick them up instead of the other kid's mom. These are things that really happen if you have to communicate that somebody's died. As she had a funny look on her face, and she opened her mouth 3 times before any words came out, and that provides realism. And if you've been there, then you know immediately what it's getting at. And even if you don't, I imagine that you probably get that idea. So that makes it pretty clear, at least from an adult's perspective right away, that the invisible dragon's a metaphor. The invisible dragon arrives the moment his mom dies, and then it's there, and it makes his life hard. The big dumb dragon makes it hard for him to focus on movies. The big dumb invisible dragon makes it hard for him to get out of bed by sitting on him, or her. I can't really tell. At school, the big dumb invisible dragon casts a ginormous shadow that follows them everywhere. So the big dumb invisible dragon is the character's grief, and it's pretty dark. It's about making peace with that dragon and how it never really goes away. But you can, and it says some things that kind of sound like they're going to be deep. I don't really fully maybe understand them. Remember when I asked if you've ever seen an invisible dragon? That was a silly question. You can never see one by looking straight at it. I think I'm too stupid to wrap my head around that, but there's something there. You have to look at the person underneath. Right. I guess that makes some sense. Anyways, I don't want to go too much into the rest of it because that kind of gives you the idea. There's just it just discusses that concept in as many different ways as it can. It really runs through the idea. It definitely has a point, but it doesn't feel like a book that exists just to communicate a lesson. It's a book that, that walks through a process. It's a processing book, and I think reading it, this is cool. It's probably the coolest kids book about death I've ever seen because it talks about it in a really heavy, dark, and real way, while also being a story about a cartoony dragon and not just straight up, literal realism all the time. Which is a balance that I think is impressive. That is. I'd say that's the low end of my positives. Let's say that's starting my positives. I just didn't like it as much as the other ones, but I'm really impressed by that. Okay, Color Dance. Maybe this almost should go below that. I think that's a pretty cool book. But Color Dance was just appealing to me. So this book, I think it was when was it made? 1989, but it has a really 70s vibe to me. Maybe I'm wrong because I was born in 1989, so I don't really know. But it's just a book about color combos, but I just think it's really pretty. I think it's really fun to look at. It starts with just green, yellow, blue, and red, magenta, purple, straightforward. But then it gets into bigger color names like chartreuse and aquamarine, and it talks about it from all these sorts of different angles. And I appreciate the vocabulary teaching and the really pretty colors, the really bright colors. I feel like it's really fun to look at. As a way to introduce kids to color, I think this is it's as simple as could possibly be, but I think it's really appealing. So that's all. I just found that appealing. Okay, Encounter. Actually, I think these are technically still my neutrals. I think my positives don't start until 2 more than this. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this book, Encounter, written by Brittany Luby and illustrated by Michaela Goad. This is a book that definitely has a really clear purpose, which is not always my favorite thing. I don't think it's bad. You can always tell when a book has a really clear purpose because it has a lot of writing in the back, author's reflection, a historical note. I found that this is a book that I think that this book kind of requires extra reading. Reading the the notes in the back, I think, is really important to appreciating the context of the story and appreciating the content of this story. I went so far as to actually continue reading interviews with the authors on the internet. And I almost think that should have been included in here, because I feel like that even provided more perspective that helped me appreciate this book. This is one of those books that I feel like the positivity of the message really depends on who is writing it. And fortunately for us, this book is written by a Native American person from Nova Scotia. And it's about the Mi'kmaq people, and that's, and it is people in that ethnic group that wrote the story, so that's important. It starts out on a good note for me. Like, it's just got some style to it. Sun rose to light all creation. He woke seagull and mouse from their nests. He coaxed mosquito from a long blade of grass. I like the language here. So it's about a Mi'kmaq person. This is before. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. I don't think you pronounced the Q, from what I could tell from my research. So it talks about this person who is a native of Nova Scotia, enjoying their day, and then this takes place at the time of this particular specific historical event of explorers coming and claiming to discover, white people claiming to discover this area. This book's purpose is apparently that in schools in Nova Scotia, this story is told from the white perspective, which, I guess that's how it usually goes, and that's usually explained as, as white people discovering this land, and it focuses on the white people's experience of that and what they do. This book is sort of an attempt at correcting that story, and interestingly enough, not correcting it as simply being from the native person's perspective, but correcting it in the sense of it's called encounter really intentionally. It's like this wasn't a discovery, this was an encounter between two people. It's about two people meeting. It's not about one person meeting the other person. It's about two people meeting each other. And that's sort of the message of this, is like, stop pushing this narrative of one person finding another person. It's two people encountering each other. So rather than strictly telling it from the native perspective, it tells it from both perspectives at the same time, and almost from the environment's perspective as these two people meet within the environment. It's told from the perspective of the animals and the sun, watching these two people meet each other. It's a really positive meeting. Now, of course, the follow-up to this meeting did not go so well, and they do kind of mention that in here. But I'm not going to go into the full detail on that. I will say that, I think that this is the sort of story that, like, if this were written by a white person, which, it probably wouldn't be written by a white person, so maybe this is a moot point. But if this had been written by a white person, I'd be really, questioning, you're really painting the white people in a really positive light here, when in fact these people were kind of on the wrong side of history, right? But maybe that's just the remnants of white guilt talking, and I'm going to let go of it and relax in this situation, because this wasn't written by a white person. This was written by native people, and this is the narrative that they chose to present, and obviously that's valid. And so what I would say is that if you're reading this book, and especially if you're a white person reading this book, you should read not just the back of the book, but also look up interviews with the authors, because that provides the context that I think is necessary to understand not just what is going on behind the scenes of this story, but also what the author's intent was, because the author has a lot more to say about what they sort of were trying to communicate with this book than the book really directly communicates. So yeah, but on the surface, it's just like a lighthearted encounter between these two people and them talking about their differences, while the nature around them talks about how similar they are to each other. So it talks about similarities and differences. The art's nice. It's got a pretty good writing style. It was all right. It did come across as The characters aren't named, or okay, I guess the characters are named, but they're named by sort of their profession, sailor and fisher, and they don't speak. So it's not like it's not like the most engaging story in the world. It's sort of like a scene setting, but I like scene setting books. As far as they go, it wasn't the most entertaining book, but it did communicate an atmosphere. Okay, that's such a long video. I've got so many books left. Okay, this one's called Shadow. This is by Susie Lee, who wrote Wave and Lines, I believe, from my last video. This book reads like this. I love it when people can do creative formatting like this. I actually think this is one of 2 books that I have in this format this week by pure coincidence. Once again, Susie Lee's books are not, they don't have words. This one I would say I would rank in between Lines and Wave. It's better than Waves, but not as good as Lines. It's pretty creative with it. So the top of the page is is like what's going on in the real world, and the bottom of the page is what's going on in Shadow. And at first, I think you might kind of suspect that it's just going to be like, oh, like things look different when they're in the shadow form. She can make, she can put her hands like this, but in this world it looks like a bird. But this book actually, and you can already see this happening on page 1. This broom is not the same shape as this flower. It goes places. The shadow does not directly represent the world above. It represents the child's imagination. As her hands actually become a bird that flies away, and the boot becomes an actual wolf, and like this sort of story of this like jungle adventure takes place underneath, and it's pretty clearly not just shadows. It's her imagination, and she in fact like goes down into the shadow world, and combines with the shadows to create this monster to defeat the wolf. And then it's crying, and then they come up and they comfort it, and the shadows come up into the real world and all join together. And so it's really got a narrative that goes places that I would never have expected, and I think it's really well done. It's really great. The art style is really charming, and it's surprising, but it's also simple and straightforward in a way that makes it concise. It's concisely told. That was good. Okay, Snow Sisters, 2 Sisters, One Snowy Day. Man, when I got this book, and I saw it up close, I was like, this is one of those books that looks like it's like Disney concept art, Frozen concept art specifically. It's by Carrie Cokius and Tegan White. I thought, this is going to be too cutesy for me. Look at those cutesy character designs. This is just going to be like quaint and twee and not substantial enough for me. I was actually surprised. This is a really charming book to me. Maybe I was just in a good mood when I read it or something, but I thought it was really charming. So the illustrations are gorgeous, honestly, and even though I don't love when people draw kids super cutesy like that, these are a little bit Precious Moments dolls-esque. I gotta say, the color in this book is what makes it amazing. Not every page has that kind of color, but look at that color! Look at that color right there. I love those colors. But yeah, it's got really simplistic writing. It's just single word sentences: coat, scarf, hat, mittens, boots, cocoa, blankets, books, and it kind of reverses on itself. So the idea of the story is that there's 2 sisters. It's a snowy day. One of them wants to go outside immediately, and one of them wants to stay inside. And then by the time that the one that goes outside comes in, the one that stayed inside goes out, and then they reverse their day. And it's almost the exact same text, I think, showing each sister swapping places, and one likes to start inside and go outside, and one likes to start outside and go inside. Really simplistic, but showing the ways that each girl, because they do the same things but in their own ways, showing the things that one girl likes to do outside versus what the other girl likes to do outside, showing the things that the one girl likes to do inside versus what the other girl likes to do inside. The brown-haired girl is more calm when she's inside, and this girl is more rowdy when she's outside. It really gives me a sense of their personalities, and also, better than that, it really does a really good job at creating a little wintry atmosphere. It's really cozy. It kind of made me nostalgic. It kind of made me remember like all the different things you can do in winter, and it made me like want to revel in the aesthetic of all of these wintry things when like times are a little bit when the world is darker and more still. It's important to find fun in the world, and this really shows like so many ways of finding the fun. And this page particularly just really reminded me of the atmosphere of being with my family, and in those times when we weren't in school and everybody was at home, we'd all kind of be doing our own thing, and there was like this kind of, it felt like a little bohemian art community inside of our home, and everybody kind of like doing their work but beside each other, so we could mix in and out of each other's worlds. And this kind of like reminded me of that. And maybe that's really personal, but to me, the story just created this incredible atmosphere that was really cozy and wintry. And a great book, I think, to get you ready for a winter season. I thought that was nice. Okay, this is Davy's Dream, a young boy's adventure with wild orca whales by Paul Owen Lewis. Pretty confident that's the person that did Storm Boy, almost said Whale Boy, Storm Boy and Frog Girl. Pretty confident. This one is not based in Native American myth. Obviously, it has sort of a very American focus with the orca whales. It's about this boy who dreams about being in the whales. These illustrations are a little bit more pen drawing and less painterly than usual for this illustrator. So I thought that was interesting. I assume it's still Paul Owen Lewis doing all the drawings because there's not an illustrator mentioned. He dreams about all of the ways that he can connect with orcas, and then the sailors tell him that you can't connect with orcas. Orcas are dangerous and you're a person. And then he finds a way to do it anyways, and he has all the moments that he dreamed about with the orcas. It's a really tiny book. All the pictures are small. It's a tiny book to begin with, but the pictures are even smaller than the pages themselves. Not sure what's up with that choice, because they're kind of where all of the charm of the story comes from, in my opinion. Really nice environments, like Pacific Northwest environments. At least I assume that's what they're going for, because it looks like San Juans to me, having grown up near the San Juans. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward story about connecting with animals. I think it would be good for a kid who likes orca whales. It was charming, but it wasn't as magical realism or mythological or folktale-y as his other books, so I didn't like it as much as those other books, but as well written enough. Decent little book. Okay, this is Yucky Worms by Vivian French, illustrated by Jessica Alberg. They say, how rude, we're not yucky, I'm very nice. Once again, this is a bugs are actually nice book. This one does not undercut its message. This one does not try and make deals where it'll give you the love for some bugs, but as long as we keep the hate for others. It's just nice. The illustration style is like fine. It's a little flat to me. The typography is a little bit annoying to me. I don't like that font, but that's pretty nitpicky. Little boy's playing in the yard, and he thinks that worms are gross, and his grandma points him out that worms aren't gross, and then it becomes very educational. It talks about body parts of the worms, the things that they do when they live their life, how their life works, and how their bodies work. It talks about worm poop and how it's made and what it is, and how they tunnel, and what happens when it rains, and what eats them, and it's just about worms. I'm not a huge fan of the art style, and there's not much of a story to speak of here, but it is educational in the good way. It doesn't have like a message to, I guess it does have a message of positivity towards worms, but it's more like educational in the real, like, teaching you science stuff, and it actually taught me things that I didn't know. I actually think I may have learned that worms have barbs on their skin at some point, but I had forgotten. So, it was fun. A little teach you about worms thing, and definitely a really straightforward, kind, wholehearted endorsement of being nice to creepy crawlies, which we need more of, so I approve this message. It's not done half-heartedly. The Tom 10 by Astrid Lindgren, who wrote Pippi, right? Pippi Longstocking? I didn't know that she did picture books, so that was kind of fun. Did she do the illustrations? No, illustrated by Harold Weiberg. Adapted by Astrid Lindgren from a poem by Victor Rydberg. So this is kind of like, it's this little gnome-like creature called the Tom 10. I like that this book presents the Tom 10 without really giving any information on what a Tom 10 is or setting anything. It's just kind of like, Moomin Troll style. It's just like, a Snufkin, a Tom 10, like just kind of demonstrating what it is through the story, but not like defining it up front. So that's nice. It kind of makes it feel real. Talks about this little folk creature, basically, and he just goes in the night and he comforts the animals during the winter and tells them that that it's not always going to be winter and they can look forward to summer. And I think the highlight here is the illustrations. Look at how cool and creepy and atmospheric that is. It's really straightforward, but it has like a repetitive cyclic storytelling style where he kind of like says a very similar rhyme to each animal that he visits in turn. So it comes across as a folk tale. It comes across sort of in the oral storytelling tradition, and it's really straightforward, but it's also really charming. So I like it a lot. Thought it was cute. It's really like, it kind of feels like an old classic book, old classic stuff. It's not trying too hard, I feel like that's something that I worry about obviously there's exceptions. There's a lot of books that I like that are modern, but a lot of the books that I read, even the ones that I would consider neutral, I feel like a lot of the downfall of modern books is that they have this like they have these too many ideas of what they want to be before they go in, and it comes across as kind of like trying hard to hit a mark instead of just being like the Tomten does. Okay, this is Trunk to Trunklet. It's by Jorge Lujan and Mandana Sadat, who I guess is the illustrator. So is it? I assume Jorge Lujan is not the illustrator. Anyways, the pictures in this are fabulous. So much charm and personality in these images, and not just in the like cool like ink print style and with collage stuff, but also just the character design itself. I really want to know who's the illustrator. Jorge Lujan is a poet. He's the author of 40 books. Okay, and yes, and Mandana Sadat is the wait, what? She's the illustrator, and then there's a third person mentioned here, translated from the Spanish by John Oliver Simon. Oh, he's the translator. Okay. So this is a book about animals, baby animals interacting with their parents, which is pretty simplistic, but it's got pretty good rhymes. Bear cub sleeps so cozily up on mommy's shoulder. He'll play with his sisters when he's a little older. The charm is really in the illustrations. It's talking about, I guess it's like you could kind of say it's like an educational book about what you call baby animals, but it doesn't really come across that way so much. It just comes across as like a fun rhyme that talks about animals' interactions with their parents. But oh my god, look at those charming illustrations! The color's nice, the characters are nice. Look at the interesting choices that you're making here. So it was fun, and it's a rhyming book that has a good rhythm to it that I didn't get tripped up by, so that's surprisingly rare. Thought that was pretty good. Look at little spiders. There's even spider families. There's like extra families in the background that aren't mentioned necessarily. Little lambs wear sweaters to guard against wind and storm. Mommy is proud when she knitted them to keep her lambkins warm. Oh, look at this one too. This is the pigeons cooing at each other. This is the mama pigeon's coo, and this is the baby pigeon trying to coo. Oh my goodness, so cute and stylistic and stylish. So yeah, this just had a ton of charm and style. Okay, only two more. An hour and 9 minutes. Seven Pablos, also by Jorge Lujan, and this time the illustrator is Chiara Carrer. I'm really interested in the fact that I actually you could have fooled me into thinking that Jorge Lujan was the illustrator, because all of his books have different illustrators, but they have really similar vibes of this kind of like sort of collagey, very multimedia, different mixed medias together, sort of like messy, but also really like intentional and stylistic. And okay, Seven Pablos is an awesome book. Gosh, this is an example of a book where like I just feel like this. Sometimes a book feels like it started with a concept, and that's to its detriment, because then somebody, like I was trying to say before, like somebody's trying to like hit a mark, and when you start with a concept, I feel like you have a danger of that. Of course, like it's not necessarily good if you just ramble stream of consciousness either, but I think it's nice when books can just be, and it just kind of like came out of you instead of like being like, oh, I have this idea and I want to succeed at it. This book is a rare example of something that feels like it started with a concept and they had a mark that they wanted to hit, and it absolutely got hit. It is so good. So it's really unique to me and atmospheric and interesting. So it says, Pablo is 8 years old and lives in Chile. His father works in a copper mine where he spends his days drilling into the rock half a mile underground. It is cold down there, but he sweats nonstop. And then it follows Pablo, but it follows Pablo in the sense that it follows everybody named Pablo. So it talks about all these different people named Pablo. There's also Pablo living in Ecuador, and here's what happens in his life. Pablo's an Argentine boy who lives in Mexico, and Pablo also lives in New York, the son of immigrants from Guyana. Am I saying that right? Guyana? I hope I'm saying that right. And like this is what happens in his life. It does a really good job at communicating these really like real feeling moments that are specific to this specific person's life, which not only gives it a sense of realism and a sense that you're actually learning about the world and actually learning about other people, but also gives a sense of actual character to these people, even though they only spend 2 pages per Pablo. It gives a real it tells a story without having a story arc. It tells actual scenes that feel like they tell you something about that person and give you a sense of what they're going through and make you empathize with them. Pablo lives in Peru. The art is gorgeous, obviously. Look at this. Every day, Frejolito would give a cup of milk to all the children of the poor families. Everyone still remembers him. Imagine if he had become president, says Pablo. And just like, you know, the moments of dialogue without it being a dialogue driven book that like give a, I just feel like I'm watching like a movie that's, I can't explain it. There's such atmosphere here and there's such personality and story and realism. It feels like I'm flying over the world as like a ghost and like actually participating in people's lives for brief moments. Everything is so specific and everything is so unique to the specific situations of these characters. And then, and it does it all through tying together from the name. So it's talking about all these different people who would be named Pablo, which is obviously like focusing not just on the world in general, but on like a specific subset of people within the world. Because people with the name Pablo have certain, you expect that there's a certain shared cultural line, through line between these characters, and there is, you know. And then it says this line at the end, which is enigmatic. There are many Pablos in the world, yet they are all one. Inside of each one, if each is a heart that beats with the same rhythm as the ocean's waves and the rotations of the planet. Which is cool. It's very poetic. You can tell this guy's a poet. And yeah, I love that idea of like it's sort of like an abstract concept of like, what if all of the people who have the same name kind of like were considered one collective life, which it isn't strictly saying that, but like, but it is sort of saying that, and it's a cool idea, but they don't harp on it either. They just kind of demonstrate it, and they do it in a way that really makes me feel like I have a window into real lives throughout the world. Beautiful, like stirring, beautiful, interesting, fascinating, makes me want to keep reading, makes me feel a sense of I'm moved by it. Okay, Polka Dot Penguin Pottery by Lenore Look and Yumi Heo. Hopefully I'm saying that last name correctly. To be honest, this is the first book that I read on my first day last week from this batch, so I'm kind of not remembering why I liked it so much, but I put it as my top book. Let's see if we can skim it real quick and get the idea. My name is Aspen, Colorado. Kimchi Lee. Actually, that's my nom de plume, my writing name, not my real name. I'm an author. I write stories about monkeys, elephants, aliens, and robots, and sometimes about me. Okay, one thing I like about this book, it's got rhythm to it. It's almost got like a Myra Coleman style, like beat poetry rhythm to it. It's got an intense amount of personality to the writing style. Now, sometimes personality from the writing style comes from the word choices. Sometimes it comes from what you decide to say, like describing, the ocean by not just saying the word the ocean, but by describing it, but by using more colorful, flowery language. Whatever. This one does it through the length of the sentences and the syllabary and the rhythm of it, which is just rarer to see, but I love it. Listen to that snap in my writing name, not my real name. I'm an author. I write stories about monkeys and elephants, aliens and robots, and sometimes about me. Like, I just want to read it like a beat poem. I work in my treehouse where there's a sign that says "Writers at work do not disturb," and when you say and when you flip it over, it says "Writer at play, come up and stay." This is how to write. Isn't this so Myra Coleman-esque? This is how to write. First, button on your writing jacket, then stuff your pockets with seaweed crackers, then sit very still and think. Last but not least, choose words and line them up, like a fruit seller who chooses her best mangoes and pomegranates and bananas and puts them on display. And when you're done, yay, a story. In spite of being clearly written by an adult with a sense for like rhythm and poetry, this story also authentically comes across to me as a book, as a child telling another child about their experiences, a child giving another child advice. The character feels really real, and I think that is to I think that what we have to credit for that is the immense amount of personality that's in the writing style of the narrator. Sometimes when a narrator sometimes when a story has a narrator, it still is just like it may as well not be a narrator because the narrator's personality takes a back seat to what the narrator is saying. In this one, the narrator's personality comes forward, and it really feels like you're talking to a real kid who's telling you about their life and their thoughts. And their thoughts are sometimes very unique, and even when they're straightforward, they have their thoughts in a unique way, and their personality comes through in every line. Not just the lines with dialogue, but the lines that are just narrative too. So this book is about art block. So this person gets art block and isn't able to write, and then ends up in this shop. Wow, I'm so happy! Ooh, awesome, cool, paint, and this like pottery shop where they paint the pottery, and by doing something that's not writing, they sort of tease away from their writing block. But it's also a message about how they can't think of anything to do. They have writer's block with the painting too, but with the painting, maybe more than the writing, it's easy for this character to discover that making a mistake, which at first they feel really bad about, ends up being the path to loosening up and accepting the mistakes as a sign of which direction to go. You make a mistake and you're like, well, I'm gonna compensate for that mistake, and that's going to be the thing that leads me and provides me inspiration for like where to go. Because before I made that mistake, I didn't know what path to take. I was just sitting at the beginning of the path. That mistake shows me which way to go because now I'm going to follow the mistake. And have fun and brighten things up, and it's a really positive message, a series of messages. It has a lot of messages. All of them kind of relate to the experience of being an artist. They're extremely authentic to the experience of being an artist. They're authentic to the experience of being a child. They feel like they're speaking to a child from a child's perspective, while being extremely stylistic and filled with personality and super well written. It also, it feels like a real kid, and I feel like because of that, if I were reading this as a kid, I would feel I would really trust this book. I would really listen to this book. I would be really engaged with this and immersed in this. And frankly, I don't have to imagine what that's like as a kid, because either the kid in me or the adult in me feels exactly the same way. I feel really immersed in this. I feel really engaged in this, and I feel like I can relate to the character. So I love this book. And then they write this story at the end, of course. This is the story that began with just hanging out. Because you can just hang out, and that can be the inspiration. You can find inspiration everywhere. Little details written about how to do pottery in the back here, too. So, yeah. That mostly what I liked about that is the writing style. But, yeah, there's a lot to love about it. Okay. I'm always, like, on the side of my videos now. I hope that's not weird. But I want to, like, give showcase of the books, you know? Anyways, that's what I got. Hour and 20 minutes. Whew, but it was a stack of more books than ever. I'll be going in a couple of days to get my next stack of books, and then that's my last stack. And I'm going to take, like, a month off because I'm going to be visiting my mom, where I don't have access to my library. So, yeah, hopefully I was a little bit cohesive. I always do these videos off the top of my head. I don't have a script, so sometimes I say the same thing over and over again. Sometimes I have something to say and I forget it. Sometimes I'm trying really hard to say something and fail. Thanks for sticking with it. I hope this was a good background noise at least. Thanks for watching. Bye. And boop.